Welcome back to the Sonny Talk Spurs YouTube channel. And this video comes off the back of a lot of people in my comment section saying I'm a bit of a happy clapper, I'm too positive and all that sort of stuff. So today, it sounds like I'm giving him an awful intro saying he's negative when he's not. But myself and Henry are going to decide what the biggest problems at Spurs are heading into this new season. And before we get underway with that, how are you doing, Henry?
I'm good, thanks, mate. It's good to be back on. I know we've done quite a number of videos in the past, and you're right. There seems to be a lot of mixed emotion, I guess you could say, within our fan base. But look, I'm good, and thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've been wanting to do this for ages after my hiatus to Germany and linking up and doing another video. But yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And we've been speaking about it before about there's a weird mood at Spurs. It's like bits of optimism, pockets of optimism, and then a lot of negatives as well. And, I, for one, still can understand we have issues heading into this season. But my first question would be obviously the transfer window is still open at the time of recording. What have you made of it so far, and how do you rate the signings of Gray, Solanke, and Yang being the only acquisitions we've made?
I mean, in terms of, I'll start with the outgoings because we've done a lot more. I think we've done
Yeah,
very well to get rid of, I guess you could say, Deadwood, Sessegnon, Ndombele, Tanganga, etc. Parrot, Roden. We've done very well. I think at times we probably could have accumulated more of a money side of things. I think we've accumulated something like £25 million and we've let go of 8 players, which in the grand scheme of things is great because they're no longer the wage bill, but doesn't really help us out in terms of spending money back into the club. In terms of incomings, Dominic Solanke, obviously, on paper, we'll have to wait and see how it's going to work out. It looks like a brilliant signing. Presses from the front, homegrown, last season, 19 Premier League goals. There are a couple of question marks. Can he do it again in a bigger side? More pressure, doing it in the Europa League as well. Archie Gray, I think definitely that's 1, 2, 3 years down the line. He looks like he's going to be a top player. My question mark is going to be, is he going to get chucked into the, kind of like we just said off air, is he going to get the baptism of fire? You are going to be starting against Leicester, for instance, on Monday night. And then the young Korean chap, we'll have to wait and see. I'd be lying if I said he's going to be a world beater in 2 or 3 years because I don't think anyone really knew much about him until a month ago. Overall, I think we've done some good bits. I still think we need a little bit more when you go into this season could be 50, 60 game season, whereas last year was only 2 FA Cup games, a League Cup game, and 38 Premier League games. So rotation is going to be important. There's still time in the window left, but we do need to act a little bit faster.
Yeah, I feel like at the moment that's where I'm getting worried. There's just not even whispers. There's nothing on Twitter. There's nothing on, any of the mainstream media of not really saying who we're linked to. Eze News or Bakayoko or anyone. No one is being linked at the moment, and that is worrying considering that it's the 15th of August when we're recording this, and the window shuts. At the end of this month, which is not many days away. And yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Of the signings look good, like on paper. Obviously, proof will be in the pudding. English quota was important as well that we've sorted out. Getting rid of the Deadwood, I think, is spot on as well. But sometimes, I know we haven't accumulated a lot of fees, but you just got to get rid sometimes. That's what Arsenal have done really well over the last couple of seasons. But yeah, I think that winger, maybe another midfielder, a fullback. I mean, Jamie Donnelly was meant to maybe be a left back this season, but he's going out on loan to Leyton Orient. But I've just before this, I was watching your video that went live on your channel about some problems at Spurs as well. And you mentioned the need for a 6. Now, I just want to get your thoughts on why do you think we need that 6? Like, I feel like it is quite an obvious answer to the question, but why? And then who would you sign if you could?
I think the 6 role for Ange's system is absolutely crucial. Now, a number of people have come out and said he doesn't want a 6 because he likes a double pivot of 2 8s and a 10 in front. We play a very similar system at times to a Manchester City and an Arsenal. Higher press from the front, a bit of a high defensive line. Our defensive line at times is very high, but I think we need that reassurance in front of the back line because, funny enough, it's the best defensive line we've had in a long time. But we still conceded 60 plus goals last season. Now, it was down from 65 the year before. So it's improvements, more goals scored, higher league position finish, lots of positives to tick off there. But it's crucial to have a 6 playing in the system we do, who is an anchor, destroyer, someone who can sit in front of that back line and give reassurance to those centre-backs that if we do give the ball away, we are physically prepared for every situation. Now, you've seen at times the blueprint to beat Spurs at times has been sit deep with a low block and then counter. And then when you counter, at times we've been out of position. You've had Destiny Udogie and Pedro Porro at times kind of in that central midfield area. With a 6, it can kind of slow that down, their counter-attack. You watch how important Rodri is to City. When Rodri doesn't play, City, dare I say it, don't look the same. Now, I'm not saying Tottenham are going to go out and sign a Rodri. I'm not saying we're going to go out and break the bank for a 70, 80 million type player. In terms of personnel, who could we bring in? You've got a number of different players who could play that role, but they're not kind of out and out sixes. You've got Edison at Atalanta, who is a central midfielder, but more defensively minded. You've got Zubimendi from Sociedad. Liverpool have been heavily interested in. You've got, the players like I know he's a fullback, but he has played there. Gertruda looks like he's on his way to Aston Villa. Before that, you had Onana, funny enough, has just joined Villa as well. You've got a couple of other players in the Bundesliga. You've got Kone in France. There are a lot of names out there, but I just don't think Tottenham will go out and sign a 6. I think Ange come out with some words to say that we're a lot more prepared physically and mentally to go into a more of a longer season this year. But my question mark's going to be, and it is a bit of a red flag for me, and I'm not saying this from a negative point or a constructive criticism. I'm just looking at the 11. On that left-hand side, if Destiny Udogie gets an injury, we don't really have cover at left back. Our cover is Van de Ven. Now, do you or anyone else think Van de Ven's hamstring's going to make the entire season playing 50-plus games? It's unlikely. So then you put Radu Dragusin at left-sided centre-back, then we don't have left-back cover. And in the number 6 role, we've got Bissouma, we've got Gray. Well, Bissouma probably won't play for a couple of weeks because of his, he's doing whatever with whatever, laughing gas. And you've got Sarr, more of an 8. Archie Gray can play there, but I think you're asking a lot for an 18-year-old. I know he played 50 games last season in the Championship, but it's a lot to do that in the Premier League, in Europe, very physical league. Then you've got Ollie Skip, who can play as a 6, but for me, doesn't have the technical attributes to distribute the ball out to the flanks, to take the ball from the centre-back and turn with pace. Then you've got Benton Core. Last season, he had huge injury concerns, was out for 3 months. So then who else is there in our team that can really... Højbjerg was probably the closest thing we had, but just didn't have the pace to get up and down. So the 3 red flags for me are, are we going to bring in a DM? What happens to the left side of defence? And the other thing that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about is when it comes to playing in Europe, our rotation is going to be 3 or 4 days. Last season, we looked brilliant first 11 games. We were fantastic. The minute we got an injury to Maddison and Van de Ven and the rotation come around, but it's going to be like that throughout the entire season because we're going to, in December, I see something on Twitter yesterday that if Tottenham get through to the 5th round of the League Cup, which you hope we would, and by then we would have 3 Europa League games in December, 2 League Cup games, and 7 league games. So you're looking at 10 fixtures potentially in December. I mean, what do you think? How are we going to rotate, and how do we sort out the left side of defence?
That's what worries me in parts because obviously we've seen in pre-season that Ange has used, a lot of his squad as you would because it is pre-season and use a lot of youth players. You've got to go back to the Man City game. He didn't trust Ashley Phillips and Alfie Dorrington. He put Emerson Royale and Ben Davies. So we had a full back line of full backs. So it is going to be extremely, I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in that respect because, as you say, when it comes to the midfield, and I've had this conversation, a lot of people comment on my video saying Tottenham's defence is not good enough. And I have to disagree with that. I think our defence is good. I think our defence, is prone to mistakes, as most defences are, but they had really good numbers last year. It was the midfield getting bypassed because, we say how important this 6 is in the Ange team, but a lot of the midfielders we have are 8. Even Lucas Bergvall coming in, 8. Kulusevski can play on the wing, but he can also play as the 8. We just don't have someone who can play as 6. I think you're spot on about Højbjerg. I just don't think he's versatile, quick, didn't have a good passing range on him either. He'd come on and do one right thing and two wrong things. So it just goes to show that when it going into this summer window, a lot of people said winger, a lot of people said midfielder, but we've gone for a striker, which I really backed, but there's still some areas of concern. You never know what's going to happen towards the end of the window. It's just really
We've also
confusing
got the right back situation as well. Is Jed Spence going to stay or not? Royale's gone. Then I think the plan is that Archie Gray can play as a backup right back if needs be. Of course, the back four is brilliant, but I do think at times in certain games the defensive line probably could be dropped, and I think that's a fair assessment, maybe 5 or 10 yards. I don't think Ange is going to, because he loves playing football in his way, but we've got a tough start to the season. I'm not a fan of ever playing a promoted club at the start of the season, especially on the first Monday night football of the season under the lights. Then we play Everton, and then we've got Newcastle away. In the last 2 games against Newcastle, we've conceded 10 goals. So, and then before you know it, it's an international break, then a North London derby. So I know the way the fan base works. The fan base works. If worse comes to worse and we don't get the right result against Leicester, I think hell will break loose in our fan base. You know what it's like. You go on the socials and you just see there's a lot of people that are at the moment very, I guess, like I said to you earlier, it's a mixed emotion around the club. But if we come out and went £50 million on a DM, I think everyone will be like, all right, now we're serious, But I don't know if the DM's the priority.
That's the thing with Spurs and money. Like, we've spent 100 million on 2 players, and Levy did cough up the cash for Solanke, which some people said was an overpay. Some people think it might be spot on because of the goals he scored last season. You mentioned Spence there. Maybe that's the idea, that he can play left back as well, because we saw against Bayern Munich in the last preseason game, he did go out there. Is he as comfortable on that side? I mean, I've seen reports saying he is likely to stay, but it's just almost like it's not enough, is it? It's still not enough. And you sort of alluded to my next question there about other areas. So from my point of view, I feel like the fullbacks, it's like our starting team can be amazing, and I feel like it is getting closer to the finished products. But there is just that depth still. It's still like, what is Ollie Skip hanging around because of home quota? Like, there's still a lot of question marks. And you think, I'm surprised some Spurs fans are so panicked, because we usually operate in the last couple of weeks in the window anyway. It was only the last couple of years where we have been a bit more switched on, and, Johan Lange's being questioned, and, was Fabio Paratici better at acquiring these players? Are we actually exploring other leagues as best as we can? I think Archie Gray is going to actually play a lot more minutes than we think. I could imagine, could he start against Leicester? Would that be him being chucked in the deep end? I could see it happening because he's played a lot of the pre-season games and he is used to this system. Maybe it's like, would Solanke start as well? But I'll go on to my next question then, and it is something that was a bit of a worry last season, and it is injuries. Who are the key players that, you mentioned Van der Ven there, but who else do you think, we need to wrap up in cotton wool? And if we lose them, then that could be the difference between, say, top 4 or finishing European spaces.
I think if I was to say 4 key players, I don't think Son will get injured. Touch wood, because he's just got this way of somehow, even when he's like nearly broken, he's just still playing.
Yeah, he played with a broken arm, didn't he, or a hand against Villa a couple of years ago, didn't he? So he's used to it.
Dominic Solanke, I don't think has had a big injury in his career. I think he will stay fit. Kulu, Johnson, Werner, I don't really have any concerns. The concerns I've got are obviously Van der Ven's hamstring. That we need to, if we could super glue that so that it never bends or stretches or whatever, we'd be laughing. I also look at Destiny Udogie. How is he going to return? He hasn't really been involved too much of pre-season. How I would actually be surprised if he starts against Leicester. I think Ange may ease him back in, which you could see Van der Ven at left back, Radu Dragusin and Romero and Porro, or you could see Spence at left back. I don't necessarily know if he'll start. He's one of my biggest concerns. Udogie, Van de Ven, Maddison. But then in Maddison, if you think we've got Bergvall that can play there, we've got Kulu that can play there. And I probably would say another one would be Pedro Porro. At one point last year, we had a back four of, the 4 fullbacks. We can't have that this year because I think going into this Premier League season is going to be the most competitive the Premier League, I think, has ever been. There's more money in the Premier League now than there ever has been before. When you've got the likes of West Ham beating Juventus to Todibo, that wouldn't have happened 15 years ago. When they had the likes of Del Piero and Andrea Pirlo, that would have never happened. Gianluigi Buffon now, it's just too much money. And I think you've got teams like West Ham that have had a fantastic transfer window. Newcastle with no Europe. If they can keep Bruno and Isak fit, Villa, how are they going to get on in the Champions League? Man United have made 4 or 5 signings. At the moment, how do we wrap up these players in cotton wool while trying to go as far in every competition to win something? It's like an impossible job for Ange unless we bring in 2 or 3 more players. Now, I think Tottenham will get Kyle Walker-Peters in the next couple of weeks. I think it kind of makes sense to a degree. Low fee, club trained, homegrown. Whether people think he's good enough or not, it's another body in. But I still think we need someone else.
Yeah, it's just not. It's not. We can't say it's been an amazing window, but we can say it's been good in parts. But there's still a lot of work to do. And you mentioned player there, so I'm going to chuck this question in because I've seen a lot of mixed reviews about this guy's season. I've seen people in their pre-season predictions say he could be the most improved. I've seen people say he could be a flop. James Maddison, is it time that do we have to hold into account a little bit of his performances? Because he started, obviously, the infamous first 10 games really well, really fluid, and then got that injury. And then when he came back, I said this to my mate the other day on another video, Luke, that there were moments where he's dropping so deep, trying to grab the game by the scruff of the neck. But then I've seen people like James Alcott say that because we have Solanke now, he's not necessarily going to be having to pull the rabbit out of the hat. He can find the striker he's been looking to link up with for ages. Solanke could do a run and then that opens a gap for Maddison to have a shot and not overplay. So these players like him and Cole Palmer, for example, they play better when they're not thinking, which sounds a bit weird to say, but like when they're just flowing.
Natural instinct sort of thing.
So what do you think of that James Maddison argument? What side of the fence are you set on?
I think signing Solanke was perfect for Maddison because he stretches defenses through. I think in terms of the Premier League last year, no forward pressed more than he did. And obviously he knows Maddison through, in and around the Premier League. Of course, I look at it right now that if Maddison, the question mark I had was, how do we get the most out of Maddison breaking down low blocks? And this is one of the things. This is the question we've got with Eze. As great as Eze is, if Eze comes to Tottenham, when you play for a team like Palace, teams naturally step up against you because you think you are Palace, when they normally play a team in the Premier League, they're the inferior opposition. When you go into a bigger football club with more pressure and there's low blocks, how do you then get the most? And this is what City and Arsenal have been brilliant at the last couple of years. How do you get the most out of that player? With Maddison, with Solanke being there, I think it will give him more space because he'll drag defenders away. What's going to be the interesting part of things is how does Maddison adapt his game around Solanke? Because that, for me, will be the standout partnership of the season. I think Solanke, I honestly would back Solanke to get close to 20 league goals, maybe more, because if Richarlison in this system, who somehow broke his pubic bone, missed 2 or 3 weeks, or 2 or 3 months, he got 14 or 13 league goals or whatever it is. Solanke in a Bournemouth side under Iriola got 19. I think with Son, with Kulu, I think he could get a lot more league goals. But Maddison's individual performance, we do need more. I'd be lying if I said, he's been absolutely brilliant. We need more. I think he got 1 goal between October and the end of the season. I think that was Villa away. Now, for a player of his quality, we just need more than that. And yes, you could say he was injured till January or whatever, but I want to see a 12 Premier League goal season with close to 8 or 9 assists. 20 GA would be ideal, but if he doesn't perform, then I don't really know what to. Who do you drop him?
I feel like at moments it looked like he was untouchable in that lineup because we thought, like even the signing of him, I thought it was like a marquee signing, really getting him in from. I know a relegated Leicester, but he had been one of the best performing midfielders in the Premier League for the last couple of years. But we've just gone through how many players can play the 8. And if, say, a Bergvall comes in and impresses, or an Archie Gray or whoever, or Kulusevski drops, Kulusevski's had a great preseason. I know he's played false 9, but if he carries on that goal scoring run, what's going to stop him from playing in that position? So, yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting season, and I still can't get my head around what the ideal midfield is going to be. But you mentioned there, Ange tweaking to the sort of football calendar. But with his sort of tactics and, it coming into question, does he have a plan B? Do you still think he does have to adapt his play at all this season? Or can, with maybe because we have Solanke now, or because we've got players who are hopefully going to go in with more form, he can keep that sort of gung-ho style, like Aussie Ardiles football of, they score 4, but we score 5, or is it just not sustainable over, especially a season now with European football back at the lane?
I don't necessarily know if it is sustainable. I think it's fantastic to watch if you're a neutral. We are at times, very, very, very good to watch. The question mark's going to be when these injuries come, because they will come. How do we adapt then? I think I don't know how many clean sheets we kept last season. I imagine it was under 10 or under.
Yeah, it weren't a lot.
Yes, like if you look at around us, the teams above us keep clean sheets galore. So does Ange need to change up some of the tactics? Does the defensive line be dropped? How do we get the most out of this squad? Like Ange has come out a number of times and he wants silverware. Now, if you want silverware, you have to adapt. Like if you look at Unai Emery, when Unai Emery played Arsenal away, he absolutely suffocated them. We played the offside trap to an absolute T and counter-attacked them. If you look at the way we went to the Emirates, we're going to match Arsenal. That's not necessarily like when Arsenal play City, they don't match them. They sit back, counter. That's kind of what we need to adapt our tactics on a game-by-game style. When we're at home and we think we're the better team, by all means, play Ange ball. But when we're in the Europa League, like if we go to Dortmund away, for instance, in the semi-final of the Europa League, if we play Ange ball against them, they'll exploit that with absolute ease. So it's a big season for Ange. It's a big season with the players. But I think we'll have a minimum of 55 games this season.
Yeah.
That's a long old season, especially with international breaks as well.
That's the thing, because I hear two sides of the coin. Especially because I've got a lot of Australian fans as my subscribers. A lot of them say the second season is where you judge Ange. He really gets it sort of cooking. But then I've got also people saying Ange has never done well in Europe, with Celtic. And then the argument is, but maybe Tottenham is a step up to Celtic. But there's just so many questions going into this. And last few now, obviously there's been a bit of a rule change about blocking off players from corners. Ben White removing the gloves of Vicario at points last season. But we're still infamously bad at defending set pieces and corners. Does this still worry you?
Yeah.
Is that a silly question?
Yeah, this for me is the number one, the biggest, by far, the biggest red flag. If we haven't spent hours and hours and hours on that training ground defending it, first game of the season, Leicester, couple of tall centre halves, or Newcastle away, Bruno whips the ball in. You got a big centre half like Dan Burn there. I don't know if you saw the screenshots floating around on the socials of our back post marking.
Yeah.
At times non-existent. We've got to improve that. I mean, last season we conceded 15 or 16 league goals off of set pieces alone. So yeah, that for me has got to be improved. It has to be improved.
And I guess another positive is Solanke. I saw a heat map or a touch map from him of his defensive actions in the other box, and obviously he's quite a tall lad as well. So hopefully he, helps us score some goals and stop some goals going in the back of the net as well. Penultimate question then is talking about problems. Is there still a big problem with Daniel Levy? Do you feel like he's gone quiet, hasn't he? He's not really been as vocal as he was maybe towards the end of Conte and Mourinho's tenure. But are you enjoying this maybe reserved Daniel Levy, or do you still think he should be active and pulling his finger out a bit more to help the likes of Scott Munn and Johan Lange, whoever's dealing with the transfers, to actually get some of these signings over the line and, you know, make some acquisitions?
Well, that's the thing. You've got a lot of chefs in the kitchen. You've got Scott Munn, Paratici still there as a consultant. You've got Johan Lange, or Lange, however you pronounce it. Then you've got Daniel Levy kind of orchestrating using the ingredients, if that's even an analogy. But I look at Tottenham in terms of outgoings. I think we've done brilliantly. We've got rid of a lot of deadwood, but you can't say we haven't spent some money. We've done 100 million, but then the frustrating thing is, you look down at West Ham, who haven't got Europe, who have done 40 million on Todibo, 40 million on Kilman, 25 million on Somerville, 25 million on Fulkrug, 20-odd million on a young Brazilian youngster, and then an Argentine on a free transfer, then 15 million on Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Is it right to say West Ham should be spending more money in Tottenham when they didn't finish in a European place? Probably not. But that's kind of where we're at. I think you can give him, you have to praise and also give constructive criticism. You have to praise the fact that we have got rid of a lot of our deadwood, but you also need to give constructive criticism. If we don't sign another midfielder, forward, or defender going into the latter stage of the window, the fan base once again will be on its knees. And I think there's a lot more people, you know, when you meet them in the pubs, on the street, at the ground, on the socials, that are a lot more at the moment annoyed than given praise for the way we've acted in the transfer window. Like, I see something earlier that someone said we've done 100 million, but only one of those players is going to be in the first 11 guaranteed, because you don't know how great Archie Gray is going to be in a Premier League season because we haven't seen it. Whereas Dominic Solanke's got that experience, and the young chap from South Korea, we're not going to see him till January. So we've done over 100 million pounds, and at the moment it's like, well, what's going to be the plan this Premier League season? If you look where West Ham are, they've probably signed 5 players that get in their 11. They signed 2 centre backs. Wan-Bissaka, Somerville will probably play off the left. Fulkrug will probably play in the 9. Like, it's hard seeing West Ham go out there and drop 150 million on players without European football.
Would you say that my counter argument to that would be that I look at Spurs' 11, and I don't think personally there is much that needs to be tweaked. It is, the problem we have is depth. Whereas West Ham, you know, they've changed, if they all start, 3 out of 4 of their back line. You know, Kilman, Wan-Bissaka, and
they've also
Todibo.
had a depth as well. So I don't think Fulkrug will start, because they've got the likes of Bowen that can play there, and Tony Somerville. I don't necessarily know if he'll start on the left, because who knows what's going to happen with Paqueta. You are right, though, in terms of the depth's a bigger worry than the 11. But when those injuries come around, you're relying on the depth. So to the flip side of that, you could say, well, we're not anticipating a bad sort of period, because bad periods happen at every club. Chelsea could lose to City, then lose 5 or 6 games, and then they had a good period at the end of the year where the new US manager Pochettino got the most out of, which is madness, which got the most out of Chelsea at the last 7-8 games of the season when they had a good period. So it swings and roundabouts. I do think, though, we need 2 more signings this window. And people say that's a big ask, but there is 2 weeks left. Hopefully, you know, Paul O'Keefe said they had 3 deals done. One of those was Solanke. So who are the other 2? Was it Pedro Neto? Okay, he's gone to Chelsea. Was it Desiree Doué? Okay, he's gone to PSG. So who are the other 5 or 6 targets? Because we're going down the data approach, and you'd imagine that they've got 5 targets for each position.
I mean, even Antonio Nuso is a long-term linked with us. He's now gone to Leipzig. So I think that's what makes it more annoying. That's where the fan base gets annoyed. It's the players that we want or that we are linked with then go to other clubs. But, you know, I personally thought that Pedro Neto wasn't much of a miss because of his injury record. But anyway, I feel like I know how you're going to answer this. But briefly, if you can wrap that all up, what do you think is the sole or the biggest problem that Spurs have this season? If you had to really narrow it down.
The biggest problem is going to be rotation when injuries hit, and how do we accommodate if we don't have a 6? I think first 11 is brilliant, but we should have a good start to the season. And then, of course, international break comes. After that, North London derby, get that out of the way. Europe comes around. I think Tottenham will have a good season, and I think we're definitely challenging for that top 4 position. The only concern I have towards the early start of next year when injuries hit, because we always seem to get between January and February, Romero will go out for a few weeks, Son might, be lacking fitness. Then what happens? Because in the latter stages of next year, we're going to have Arsenal away. We're going to have Newcastle at home. We're going to have Villa at home. We get plus Europa League. So to make it as short as possible, rotation for me is going to be the biggest uphill battle this season. And that's not just with Tottenham. That's with every club, because there's more games now than ever before. There's more competitions. International breaks are longer. God knows why we need 3 international breaks throughout a season just after an international competition. But plus you've got the Nations League. So that's going to be the biggest thing for me. Rotation with these players. And how does Ange kind of maximize the juice from the squeeze? How does he get the most out of the squad?
No, I think I agree with that completely, because that's just my worry. I wonder how he's going to handle it. But I do trust Ange to do the right thing and know that he can't run these players into the ground, because he knows the injury record, as well as Ten Hag with United and Eddie Howe did with Newcastle last year, because they had similar problems. But that's all we've got time for today on the Sonny Talk Spurs YouTube channel. I want to say a massive thank you to Henry for jumping on. Very short notice as well. And I just wanted to, I thought this idea was good to chat with him about, because we have similar opinions on the Spurs, but, we know when to be negative and we know when to be positive. But cheers, Henry. Is there anything you want to plug on either of your channels? Obviously, both doing really well, the Spurs one and the football one.
Yeah, any kind of Tottenham-related content will be on Henry Wright TV. You will see an occasional Tottenham video on Henry Talks Football, but yeah, that's where you'll find me, both channels. And yeah, obviously, thanks for having me on. Pleasure as always, and hopefully Tottenham have a good season. It's only 3 or 4 days to our first game, which is going to be. I'm already nervous thinking about it, and it's a promoted side. But yeah, thanks for having me on, mate.
You wouldn't be a Tottenham fan if you weren't nervous about Leicester away on the opening day of the season. But yeah, cheers again. Obviously, like and subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and become a member in the link in the description down below. And go over to Henry's channel and do all the same stuff over there. But until the next video, which will probably be a reaction to that Leicester game, I'll see you guys then. Bye.